Interviews with the head of trade mission for the Bahamas, Gary Griffin. They're exploring potentials of doing business with Ghana. Stay tuned. This is Business Focus. Before we go on a quick break, we'll bring you updates from the currency and the commodities market, as well as the treasury bills market. So this is Business Focus here on TV3 with me, Michael Obodu. We'll go for a quick breather. When we come back, we'll delve into the conversation for tonight. Stay tuned.
Every day, people have money emergencies. Ma, I need my school fees emergency. Mommy chop money emergency. Emergency. Catch it. And the rent emergency. Now, there's a new emergency number in town. More money, challenge and enjoyment. At the top life we got. Dial star 770 hash for all your money emergencies and top life.
Dial star 770 hash for money emergencies and get easy and quick access to your money, loans, and other banking needs. EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank.
Welcome back. This is Business Focus here on TV3 with me, Michael Obodo. And do remember that Business Focus is sponsored by Telecel and EcoBank. Now, staff involvement in bank fraud continues to rise, with the Bank of Ghana's April 2025 fraud report revealing that 365 staff were implicated in 2024, a 33% increase from 2023. About 155 staff were dismissed, mainly for cash theft. Tonight, we are joined by Chief Executive of the Ghana Association of Banks, John Nehua, to discuss how the industry is responding to these worrying trends and what measures are being put in place to rebuild confidence. But before...
Ghana is raising alarm over the rising involvement of staff in fraudulent activities across banks, specialized deposit-taking institutions, SDIs, and payment service providers. According to the 2024 fraud report, 365 staff were implicated in fraud-related cases, up from 274 in 2023, representing a 33% increase. Of those involved, 75% were implicated in cash theft or suppression cases, slightly down from 77% recorded the previous year. The report also shows that 155 staff were dismissed by banks and SDIs, with more than half, specifically 83, linked directly to cash theft-related fraud. The central bank says it is concerned about the steady rise in staff involvement in such incidents and is urging financial institutions to reinforce internal controls, enhance due diligence during staff recruitment, and strengthen in-house training on ethical conduct. It is also calling on banks and SDIs to ensure the prosecution of culprits to serve as a deterrent. Meanwhile, of the 83 million cedis fraud value at risk in 2024, only 3 million, representing 4%, was recovered, bringing the net value at risk to 80 million. This partial recovery, according to the report, was made possible through stakeholder collaboration and improved fraud mitigation measures.
So that was the report basically highlighting the fact that the number of fraud cases recorded amongst bank staff for 2024 rose by about 33% compared to the figure from the previous year in 2023. And before we delve into the nitty-gritty of the conversation, every day people face different emergencies: police emergency, fire emergency, medical emergency, you name it. But many Ghanaians don't know their emergency numbers. Well, here is one you'd want to remember, and that's *770#. Yes, *770# is the new EcoBank money emergency number. *770# gives you instant access to loans, fund transfers, utility payments, airtime and data purchases, and so much more, even without data. So there's no need to panic when you find yourself in any money emergency. EcoBank will always come to your rescue. Dial *770# now for solutions to your money emergencies. EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. But we have joining us in studio now the CEO of the Ghana Association of Banks, John Nehua. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and for joining us. 33% increase in fraud cases among staff. Quite worrying, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. We are concerned as a community, as banks. We find that a bit more troubling. And though it's come down a bit, it's still worrying.
Come down a bit?
Oh yeah, it's come down a bit in terms of percentages of the fraud events that have been recorded. Okay. But we know that the central bank has gone through some processes in getting us to where we are at the moment. The report has gone through various refinements, and the report we have now is much better than the report we used to have about 3 years ago. But there is a lot more that, as banks, we would want the report to reveal or unveil, which is, instead of, clubbing banks and SDIs when it comes to staff involvement, it would be good to separate the banks from the special deposit-taking institutions, so that when I'm responding, because I don't have visibility on what is happening on their end, then I can narrow down properly on what is happening at our end. But if you look at the section of the report that deals with bank-specific fraud incidents, you find that clearly the number of fraud incidents have come down by 26% year on year, which means that there's something good the banks are doing. If you look at the statistics, apart from two of the fraud typologies, which is ATM fraud and POS fraud, and remittance fraud, all the other 11 fraud typologies recorded decline when you pick the banks on a standalone. But when it comes to staff fraud, it's joined together, and it's very difficult to disaggregate to say how much of this 365 relates to banks only and how much of it relates to the SDIs. And I say this because of, if you drill down into the staff fraud, you will find that out of the 365, 275 resulted from cash suppression and cash theft, which normally happens within the environment where staff of banks or SDIs are sent to the field to collect cash from market women, shops and the like, and they come back to instead of coming to credit the customers, some of these monies find their ways into the pockets of these people who go to the field. And as far as I know, a lot of banks have discontinued that service, where people go to the field to be collecting physical cash. And those who are doing it, they have introduced devices that enables the depositor to know that instantly my cash has been collected and my account has been credited. But we know that it is a predominant modus operandi within the SDI population. So that's why I don't want to come across as though I'm levying all the problems on the SDIs, but clearly we'll call on the central bank that going forward, if that section of the report could be disaggregated, so that just like you've done for the big chunk of the report, then it will be very clear on how we can properly respond. But clearly, there's a problem. Even if there is one fraud involving staff, it's a problem, because as banks, we are a trust institution. People ride on trust and confidence within the financial system. That is why they come to the bank and they take their money from their rooms, their shops, and wherever they make their money, and come and live with the banks with the commitment or the promise that whenever they need their money, they get it back. So if they even have a 0.000001% chance that the money they put there, somebody can just dip their hand in and they will lose something, it is a problem that as an industry we must work on. We are aggressively working on it. As to whether we are reaping the benefits from the interventions we have implemented, is still, some way, away from coming to closure on whether we have made some significant inroads in suppressing staff involvement in fraud.
Okay, so I know you've issued your reservations with the report in general, but still we do know that at least fraud cases across the industry increased by about 5%, and the total value at risk rose by 13%. At least to some extent, that still reflects on the banking industry. So what would you say is accounting from this, speaking from the banking industry perspective? Okay, all right. So since you also mentioned the total value at risk, when we are measuring fraud and whether it is pervasive or prevalent within an ecosystem, the best metric to use is the incidence, the number of incidents. Because as banks, you can record 1,000 incidents in year one, and 2 incidents in year 2. And you will say that, oh, I've made a lot of progress because 1,000 incidents against 2 incidents. But the value at risk for the 2 incidents can be 10 million and the 1,000 incidents can be 2 million. You understand? So the value at risk, as though it's important, our focus is actually not there. Our focus is how do we reduce the numbers? How frequent are people able to attack and be successful in their attack? If we are able to bring the numbers down, the value will definitely decline. Because banks, if you read the report, it tells you about one incident involving 50 million. So it's an outlier. And it is in the 85 million you are referring to. So if you take that 50 million away, you are talking about 35 million or thereabout compared to what happened in the prior year. So in measuring fraud prevalence, the focus of our deliberation should be on the number of incidents, whether we are growing the numbers, though transaction volumes are increasing, whether the number of fraud cases are also increasing or the numbers are coming down. If the numbers are coming down, it's a positive sign.
it can be coming down, and then but unfortunately the value could go up because of one or two outliers within the numbers.
So it wouldn't be fair to look at the numbers alone, because if one person was able to succeed at a fraud case of 50 million, that's even more worrying than the petty ones that they get away with, don't you think?
No, I agree with you, but the point is that it will surprise you to know that the methodology or the modus operandi that one will use to steal 100 Ghana cedis is very similar to what somebody will use to steal 100 million Ghana cedis. The fraud complexities are not very different because the amounts are very huge. So that is why I'm talking about placing a lot more emphasis on reduction in the fraud incidence. If the fraud incidence is increasing, we get a lot more worried. The value at risk is important, but the key metric is the number of incidents. If you are recording progressively a declining trend, then what you are doing is working. And that is why I am particularly happy that out of 13 fraud typologies, only 2 recorded growth in incident cases. And if you check, the statistic that recorded a jump or significant growth in the value at risk is the forgery. And I think forgery and manipulation of documents. So it can be maybe a credit document that somebody would have transposed a number or done something funny with it. It's not something that is very routine or happens very often within the fraud, arena. And as worried as we are that we almost lost 85 million Ghana cedis, which is basically the money we trade. We've got when fraud happens and it's our problem, it goes against the bank's bottom line and we have to cough it up. And it's a worry. But I am excited about the significant drop that we have recorded overall in the incident. 26% year-on-year drop. When the total of the fraud cases went up 5%, or is it 13%? About 5.5% across. And then but the banks recorded a decline of 26%. Which means that there is something we are doing right. And if you pick all the fraud typologies, 13 Bank of Ghana in the report, only 2 recorded growth year on year. And those 2 are the areas that we will be engaging the banks to see how we can drill down further to understand for the banks that recorded those frauds, the modus operandi, and share information on how we can stop it in subsequent reports.
It's good you mentioned the forgery and manipulation of documents, because that was my next question for you. Especially when it's accounting for 67% of fraud value at risk in banks. How is this happening, especially at the time where we know banks in Ghana are driving a lot more digitalization of their operations and the likes?
When it comes to forgery and manipulation of documents, it's mostly got to do with credit. And credit sanctioning is still very much manual. Apart from retail credit, where we have automated credit scoring, corporate credit is still, or SME credit, you have to do the paperwork, do reports, and go through the mail of a lot of, one credit file can be that size. Within that size is what we are talking about, suppression or manipulation of numbers. It often happens that as credit sanctioners or the credit officers in the banks, they rely a lot on the originators. The originators are the people who bring the business, the business arm, let's say corporate or SME or retail. And the information they pass on is what gets recorded in the documents. And if whoever is providing that information intentionally manipulates or changes a certain number, sitting at the head office and looking at the number to take decisions is very difficult, unless perhaps you go and reperform whatever activity that is done. So within the credit chain, anybody can let you down. But you must have a process that gives some cross checks and balances, so that if Mr. A decides to do something funny, Mr. B has a way of asking questions that reveals the flaws within that analysis. It's a problem, but as a community, we are very much up to the task, and I'm sure in the next cycle of the report, we will see some progress in that area.
So in the short to medium term, what solutions are you preferring for this particular
working with the Chartered Institute of Bankers and also with the Bank of Ghana, we've introduced the Ethics and Professional Conduct Certification. So every year, each bank staff will have to go through a certification program on ethics and professional conduct, bank professional conduct. We see that as a way of getting them to, like throwing more light on how important behaving properly and conducting your business in the right way is critical to what you deliver. So banks are now not just measuring what is achieved, but the how, the what is achieved. And the how is where the ethics, integrity, and professional conduct comes in. And that is where we are focusing our attention. And hopefully, we believe that we are going to reap some very positive results from that.
So a key stakeholder in all of this is the public, and we've been to the streets to speak to them. So I think it will be important to hear what they had to say about this particular report, and maybe we'll pick your thoughts on it. So we were on the streets earlier today to speak to the public on what they make of this latest report, and this is what they had to say.
For the fraud cases increment, I feel it's mostly because we've not yet embraced digitalization to the fullest. I feel Ghana should learn to manage finances using more enhanced digital systems. Looking at the cybersecurity threat landscape evolving with the advancement in artificial intelligence, we need people who can, battle this face-to-face using more advanced digitalization systems that can, help in exploring this new threats emerging, like deepfakes, because most of these fraud cases were because of deepfakes. They can create an exact replica of, your CEO and ask you to perform a transaction. And then if you don't know that there are deepfakes possible, mimicking the voice and stuff, it gets much harder. So I feel there should be more like retraining of our resource personnel to update them with these new cyber threats in the landscape.
But the fraud cases is not good at all. It's very, very bad, and they should arrest them.
The government should enforce laws to, penalize those who involve in fraud, and then there should be excess security in the banks in order to prevent fraud.
So those were Ghanaians sharing their thoughts on the Bank of Ghana reports on the fact that fraud cases among staff of banks has gone up by 33%. Mr. Ihua, CEO of the Ghana Association of Banks, is with us. He says the report has to be reviewed because he thinks the 33% rise is not only bank staff are not the majority in that. Interesting argument, but at least you've heard what the public are saying. They are not happy about this. Yeah. And one raises the issue about AI and the issue of deep fakes. Have you people as banks started experiencing that particular type of fraud?
I think it's a very, very important point that a gentleman made about deepfakes, AI, and people using that to perpetrate fraud. And I'm very happy to report that in that same report, you find that the fraud resulting from cybersecurity and email fraud and the like went down within the banking environment, because we are doing a lot. The banks have invested heavily within their architecture to preempt or to prevent these fraud cases from happening. Or if they do, they have systems in place that quickly, goes through the system to send alerts. Aside that, central bank also has, I'm sure you are aware of the FXOC, every transaction that is happening within the banking system, the central bank is also running their own cyber systems around the bank transactions. And wherever they sense any snippet of fraud incident, they will send an alert to the bank that is involved. If it's all the banks, they will send an alert to whoever is the contact that has been given to the central bank, and quickly we move in there. So I'm not surprised at all that we made some progress. But as the gentleman said, as a community, it is a big risk, because a lot more of banking transactions are moving onto digital platforms. And how ready is the population that we are dealing with? How ready are the banking population? How ready are the general public? Those who are using their phones to move several hundreds of thousands of Ghana cedis on a daily basis, how ready are they on personal financial security? You see, the bank can do everything they have to do. They can invest in all the systems. They can do everything. But if I get access to your phone, and by any design, I know your password and I know your bank details,
the bank can do nothing, absolutely nothing about it, because there's a two-factor authentication. That two-factor authentication will come to the same phone, and the same person has access to the phone to be able to respond. So personal financial security, keeping our passwords together with our wallet, in our wallet, with our bank card, writing our passwords in our diaries, sometimes in our notebooks, we've written all kinds of things, our access to our computers. We write them because and sometimes understandably, it's difficult to keep track of all these several passwords all over the place. Okay. But please, as much as possible, you try and keep it safe as you transact on these digital platforms, because you never know who else is interested in the transaction you are undertaking.
The more reason why it's surprising that you were winning on the cybersecurity front and yet losing on the on the other side, that you should have more control over.
Let's together make a special appeal to Bank of Ghana that we are very, very excited about the quality of the report. But we have to move a step further. When we started, the report was one big report. We used to call it banking sector report, a fraud report. We were in there. We had the PSPs, we had the SDIs, and we had the banks. Then we went to Bank of Ghana, and they gracefully agreed. Now they separate the reports. We have the PSP side, you have the bank side, and then you have the SDI side. But when it comes to staff involvement, unfortunately, there is still an aggregation of the banks and the SDIs. We, the banks, we want to narrow down on what is wrong with us, what is wrong with our people, which areas are we recording the significant increases or the significant growth in these fraud incidents involving our staff. If it is in the area of, as the report says, suppression of cash, and theft, then we narrow down properly, particularly for the banks that still send, their staff out there to be collecting cash on the field, markets, churches, and the like, so that they can fortify their controls in that area. So work is, aggressively ongoing, and hopefully the next report will show a lot more deep in the number of fraud cases.
All right. Thank you so much. So we'll switch now to our next topic, which I know interests you to some extent, is the Cedi. So the Cedi recently gained against the dollar has sparked cautious optimism, with the Bank of Ghana forecasting a period of greater stability. The local currency has recently firmed to around 14 cedis, 55 pesos against the US dollar. And the Bank of Ghana governor says the era of sharp volatility is ending. Joining us now to analyze these developments is economist Dr. Edu Owusu Sarkodie. Doc, thank you so much for your time.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
All right, Doc, so I'll pick your initial thoughts. What do you think is accounting for this stability and the appreciation we are beginning to see over the last week?
Well, I think it's a good thing for the economy. We all know how difficult the economy was in the year 2022 ending. And at the beginning of 2023, the government at that time took the decision to take the country to an IMF program. And a prior action to the IMF program was the debt restructuring, both domestic debt and external debt. We all know what happened with the suspension of interest payments, suspension of principal payments, etc., etc. And then it was expected that we would gain about 60 billion Ghana cedis from the DDEP and about $10 billion savings from the external debt exchange if it was successful. And I think we've made, as a country, we've made some strides in both the domestic debt exchange and the external debt exchange. We saw a reflection of that in the current account, where we started recording current account surplus by the end of 2023, coming down to 2025, balance of payment surplus, and also with the accumulation of reserves from that. So the build up from the debt exchange, both domestic and external, plus the IMF program, which brought in the various tranches that we have received so far, plus the Bank of Ghana, the World Bank support that we see. In addition to this, within the IMF program, we also saw the tight fiscal policy, the tight monetary policy. As we speak, government is doing 0% BOG financing. So, I mean, all these developments in the economy, both domestic and external factors, one of which could be attributed to, some people say, the trade war, which has weakened the U.S. currency against major trading trading currencies in the world. But I have not done any research on this to prove that. But some analysts believe that the trade war is weakening the US dollar. And as analysts, if you go to do this research, you will see Ghana's performance against other trading currencies. If our cedi is still depreciating against other currencies, or if the US dollar is depreciating against other trading currencies like the pounds and the euros and the Chinese yuan, then we can conclude that the US dollar has weakened against other currencies. But apart from these external factors, a number of domestic factors have accounted to the relative stability. One thing I haven't mentioned is the gold program, the Gold for Reserves program, which was started by the previous administration. And then this current administration has also continued. They have introduced the gold board with the idea that they want to leverage the gold gift that God has given us to stabilize our city, to build reserves. So our reserves has been built. I think it's around $9 billion in terms of dollars. And then also we have also accumulated some reserves in terms of gold. So this is also good. One thing that I must add is the uncertainties which were reduced about the election, the uncertainties about the elections. You know, and every year when we go for elections in any economy, especially those emerging economies, there's this fear of uncertainties about the elections. But God being so good, thank God for Dr. Bawumia for conceding early. And his concession, the early concession by Dr. Bawumia, really, faced out these uncertainties that people didn't know the outcome, what the outcome would be. Is he going to fight? Is he going to go to the Supreme Court, etc., etc.? But his concession really settled all these matters. And after the 2024 elections, you saw that many investors or many Ghanaians or even outsiders who were buying gold as a store of value because they didn't know what will happen, who were buying dollars, I should say, because they didn't know what will happen after the elections. All this speculative demand for dollar has really come down, it's declined, and I think it's all good for our economy. So a number of these factors, both domestic and external, the DDEP, the external debt exchange, the IMF program, all the reforms within the IMF program, the tranches that we have received, the gold for reserves program, the external factors, the trade war, have all accounted for this relative stability of the cedi. And we hope that we deepen our domestic efforts, our domestic reforms to continue with the stability, because we know what will happen when the cedi starts depreciating faster. We know the implications on inflation, implications on transport fares, implications on even wache and cocoa prices. So we hope that all together, all stakeholders together, will continue to deepen our efforts, to increase our efforts to stabilize the cedi so that it doesn't get out of hand. We haven't been to the Eurobond market since January 2022. And still, we are experiencing this stability. It shows that we can really manage our economy without going to borrow that high. So we should manage our expectations about going back to the Eurobond market. If we can really leverage the gold, we can leverage other natural resources that we have, we should be able to do it to stabilize our currency. Apart from gold, we also have other natural resources. We have the oil, we have manganese, we have bauxite. We should be able to leverage that. We have seen that consistently from 2017 coming down. With the exception of the year 2022, Ghana has recorded positive trade balance. That means that we've always exported more than we've imported. But the question is the ownership. So going forward, as a country, we should try and own a greater part of our natural resources so that our cedi can continue to stabilize, which is good. So I think it's a good thing, Michael. It's a good thing for our economy. So we should try and continue with the efforts that the government is putting in.
Okay, now this appreciation we've seen is despite the fact that we are yet to receive, I believe, the fourth tranche from under the IMF program. Should that money hit the government's account, how much further do you see stability or appreciation of the cedi going?
If not at all, it will keep the current stability at the same level, if not appreciate. And so we hope that the next tranche, which when received, I think it's around $360 million or so, when received, we would have relative stability. The cedi will gain a higher value against the US dollar, against other trading currencies. So it's going to really help strengthen our Cedi. And if it is strengthened, then we can really have the major stability that we are craving. We all know that going to the IMF program, really the focus was really about stability. When you decide to go to IMF program, you first look at your balance of payment, you look at your reserves. If you are running out of reserves, then you quickly have to run to them. And so going to them has really been worth it. I think we have gained a lot for going to them, building the reserves, stabilizing our currency. So the next tranche, it will help further strengthen our Cedi, and then also the next fight is against inflation. We have seen that international crude oil price has been declining, or if not declining, but maybe stabilized around 60, 65. I just checked, it's around 65 or 68 dollars per barrel. If it continues to stabilize around that side, then I think our fight against inflation with this stability will be able to fight a greater fight against the inflation. We expect inflation to also go down. We expect to continue the disinflation process. Kudos to the previous administration and the current administration for continuing with the IMF program. And key aspects of the IMF program has been two: the tight fiscal policy and the tight monetary policy. Tight fiscal policy, i.e., they've been trying to close down the gap between revenue and expenditure. In the year 2023, the government cut expenditure by 20 billion Ghana cedis. In the year 2024, even though in nominal terms they did not cut expenditure, but as a percentage of GDP, expenditure was cut by 6 percentage points. In the year 2025, we have seen that this present administration has cut expenditure by almost 10 billion Ghana cedis. The tight monetary policy also from the Bank of Ghana's point of view, where they have been increasing the policy rate. Recently, they increased the policy rate by 100 basis points from 27 to 28. Ghana is also still doing 0% financing from the central bank. So all these efforts, that we must commend both the previous administration and the current administration for staying committed to the IMF program. It is my hope that even if the program ends next year by April 2026, if the IMF program ends, our leaders will continue to adhere to this discipline, fiscal and monetary policy, so that at the end of the day, we all benefit. Because we all saw how Guta and traders and you journalists, everybody was crying about the city losing value and how it was eroding their capital. I often hear Dr. Joseph Obeng of Guta president, always lamenting about how the Cedi depreciation was, eroding their capital. Now we have some stability, and you also mentioned that we are seeing appreciation, which is always good for us. So we should continue our efforts and deepen, continue our efforts to strengthen the Cedi.
Sure. Now, Mr. Wa, you are the banks that handle the Forex and all of that. How has this year been so far, especially with the stability that we've experienced?
I would say the year has started well, and listening to the governor, just yesterday, he even made another public statement that the foreign reserves, we have a very healthy foreign reserves. And healthy foreign reserves means the Bank of Ghana's ability to intervene in the Forex market is also enhanced. And if the central bank is able to intervene, then they are able to moderate the pressures that the demand side exerts on the currency. And that gives us the kind of stability that we are seeing now. But one thing that I have said many times without number is within the Cedi depreciation every time, the speculation element of it is close to about 30%. Whenever we've seen, more or less like successive depreciation, then speculation immediately picks up. Once the speculation picks up, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, I'm speculating because I'm anticipating that the currency is going to depreciate. So they buy more, and then it exerts more pressure on the Cedi, and of course, then there is further depreciation. Then the element that is attributable to speculation heightens. But what kind of funds are these speculators holding? Are they short-term funds? Are they medium-term or long-term funds? If they are not funds that they can hold for long, and they speculated by buying dollars, and all of a sudden they are seeing that the dollar is holding its own, the Cedi is holding its own, or it's even appreciating against the dollar, what do? They offload. And once they come on the market to offload, because they don't have use for the currency, they only bought it for temporary gains. And the moment they come back to the market to say, hey, we are offloading because we are almost getting close to making losses on the currency that we purchase, then you find that we have this aggressive decline as well. What we have to avoid is bringing the speculators back into the market. The moment you get paid and you are thinking of buying dollar, there's a problem. It means your strength, your confidence in the cedi is weakened, or your confidence in the currency environment or the economy, inflation is weakened, or you believe that the dollar is a better store of value than your own base currency, which is your Ghana cedi. So the managers of the economy should at all times fight that cancer. That cancer is called speculation, because we don't have a very solid export base. If you don't have a solid export base, it means that your earning capacity has its constraints. So if there is speculation, you cannot go and you don't print dollar. Dollar is not our currency. What we print is the cedi. So we have to do more with the little dollar we have and concentrate, particularly for local transactions, as much as possible to transact in the currency we control, which is Ghana cedi.
Thank you very much. So that was John Ewa. He is the CEO of the Ghana Association of Banks. Earlier we had Dr. Idum Susako there, an economist, also share his thoughts on how the cedi performance has been this year and efforts that can be made to sustain it. This is Business Focus here on TV3 with me, Michael Obodu. We'll take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll delve into more. Please stay tuned. It's sponsored by EcoBank and Telecel. So earlier we had the opportunity to interview the Vice President of the Bahamas Senate and Chairman of the Bahamas Trade Commission. He was in Ghana last week, and we had the privilege of interacting with him to understand what his country plans on doing with Ghana in terms of trade and increasing the volume of trade that goes on between the two countries. Take a look at the video. What has been the engagement since your arrival?
So since our arrival, we've had high-level engagement with government officials. We've met with a number of ministers of the government. We've also met with a number of private sector companies. And as you would know, I was also the keynote speaker at an Africa-Caribbean trade conference that was hosted here in Accra earlier this week.
Interesting. So what has been the general impressions since your interaction so far with the Ghanaian business community and government?
So it seems as though Ghana is ready to export Ghana, essentially. So what we've gotten from the government is that there's going to be a huge focus on consolidating industries and exporting, so taking Ghanaian products to the world. And we think the private sector here in Ghana is ready for that. So there's been lots of interest, lots of questions about the Caribbean. I think there are some people who are very educated on the markets in the Caribbean, and I think there are some who need a little bit more information on how to do business in the Caribbean, and knowing that the Caribbean is essentially the gateway to the Americas. And so we're excited to work with the government, work with the private sector in sort of bringing everybody along in sort of really looking at the Caribbean and the Bahamas in particular as a new potential export market, but also as a potential partner generally for international business, trade, and investment.
So what's really are the prospects you're looking at in Ghana?
So for the Bahamas, it's a few things that we're looking at. So in the Bahamas, we are dealing with what we have called a cost of living crisis. Things are extremely expensive in the Bahamas. The Bahamas is a service economy, so our services that we mostly offer are tourism and financial services. We're a very well-known international financial center. So what that means is that we import most of everything that we consume in the country. So we import the majority of our goods from the United States. And so about 2 years ago, the government started a trade diversification strategy where we're looking at creating new relationships around the world with new trading partners. And so the main reason for that is to lower the cost of living in the Bahamas. So we want to get high quality products from around the world that are more cost advantageous to the Bahamian society. And so in Ghana in particular, we're looking at raw materials, but we're also heavily looking at building supplies and construction materials. So everything from cement to steel, iron, lumber, rubber, and other things that can be used in the construction process. So that's the main thing that we're looking for. But as we're learning, as we converse with people more and get a little bit more deeper into the Ghanaian economy, is that there's so much more that Ghana can offer as well. And so we're very much open to all the possibilities in terms of textiles, in terms of finished products. There are lots of very talented craftsmen, of shoes, of bags, of clothes that we've met here, and we're very open to bringing those into our market as finished products or forming collaborations between Bahamian business people and Ghanaian business people where perhaps some of the value added work can be finished in the Bahamas for onward consumption in the United States, the Caribbean, or Latin America.
It sounds exciting, and I'm sure you've engaged the business community. So what are they really saying with regards to these things that you need? Because they, of course, are things that we actually have in abundance to some extent.
Correct. So they're saying exactly that. They're saying exactly what we need is exactly what Ghana has. But the thing that we're here sort of really trying to figure out is the actual logistics of it. And so one of the things that I think we, we consider ourselves brothers of Ghana. So I don't know if you know the history, but the first slave ships that came to the Bahamas would have come from Ghana. And so the history shows that most Bahamian people would have Ghanaian ancestry, in particular from the western region and the Ahanta people. And so there's that sort of shared history, that sort of shared blood. And so we first and foremost consider the Ghanaian people our brothers and sisters. But one of the things that we found is an impediment is that there haven't been direct trade routes. So the trade routes were direct when there was transatlantic slavery, but somehow when it comes to commerce, these days there aren't those direct routes. So a lot of the goods are transshipped through the United States or through Europe and through these other means. What we have to do now as a people, Africans and Caribbean, are to bridge that gap. And so about 2 years ago, after our first mission, we went back to the Bahamas and said, we need to figure out ways to make it easier to do business in Ghana. And so we did visa-free travel. So now Bahamians can travel visa-free to Ghana, and Ghanaians can travel visa-free to the Bahamas. And that just makes it easier for government officials and for business people to travel and to engage. So the second step what we're looking at would be direct flights. So right now, Ghanaians or Bahamians would still have to go through the United States or London or somewhere else to get to each other's countries. So we're looking at establishing direct air transfer, and we're also looking at direct shipping routes. And so those are the questions we're mostly getting from Ghanaian entrepreneurs and Ghanaian businesses. We have what you're looking for. We want to establish these partnerships, but how are we going to get our goods back and forth? And so that's what we're establishing right now. So we're looking at various avenues of establishing direct trading routes, so direct sea routes and direct air routes.
Interesting. The logistics conversation never seems to end, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a major problem with moving goods. But also within that lies the opportunity to invest in it. Are both countries looking at anything of that sort?
Yes, so just so you know, the Bahamas has the 3rd largest deep sea port in the Western Hemisphere, and we don't use it to its maximum capacity. So our vision is to have the Bahamas be a transshipment hub for African goods going into the Caribbean, Latin America, and the Americas. And so
that was Gary Griffiths. He is the chairman of the Trade Commission for the Bahamas. They're speaking to us about the prospects of trade between Ghana and the Bahamas. But then every day people face different emergencies: police emergency, fire emergency, medical emergency, you name it. But many Ghanaians don't have or know their emergency numbers. Well, here's one you'd want to remember, and that's *770#. Yes, *770# is the new EcoBank money emergency number. *770# gives you instant access to loans, funds transfer, utility payments, airtime and data purchases, and so much more, even without data. So there's no need to panic when you find yourself in any money emergency. EcoBank will always come to your rescue. Remember to dial *770# now for solutions to your money emergencies. EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. Well, on that note, that'll be all for today's edition of Business Focus here on TV3. For more business stories, please visit our website, s3news.com/business. I am Michael Obodu. Catch you same time next week. Thank you for watching. As always, please stay safe.
Business Focus is brought to you by EcoBank. Telecel.